Her father disowned her at 19, casting her out of the only home she had ever known. He said she was no longer his blood, no longer his daughter. Everyone believed her life was ruined forever. But years later, she returned, not in shame, not in sorrow, but as the owner of the very house her father once forbade her to step into. How did the rejected daughter find the strength to rise from hunger and betrayal to triumph? What path turned her tears into legacy? And what would become of the father who had lost everything to pride? Stay with me. This story will shock you, move you, and remind you of the true power of resilience and forgiveness.
In a small, bustling village in southeast Nigeria, there was a young woman named Miriam Okafor. She was 19 years old and widely admired as one of the brightest jewels of her community. Her neighbors used to say, "That girl is special. She will bring honor to this land." People saw her as a perfect role model, gentle with elders, hardworking with her hands, and always quick to greet even the most distant stranger. Each morning, as the sun bathed the red soil roads with light, Miriam would walk to the family store beside her father. There, she arranged goods, smiled at customers, and chatted warmly with women who came to buy grain. Her laughter carried through the marketplace and softened even the sternest of men. Her father, Chief Obinna Okafor, was a man of wealth and influence. He was tall, dignified, and deeply respected by other chiefs. To him, Miriam was more than just a daughter. She was his crown jewel, the pride of his gray hairs, the child who would carry on his legacy. Many times, he would say in front of visitors, This is my golden treasure. My reputation shines because of her." Her mother, Grace Okafor, also adored Miriam. Unlike her husband, Grace's love was quiet, soft like rainfall in April. She would watch her daughter laugh and whisper, "You remind me of my youthful days, only brighter." Yes, Miriam was indeed at the center of a world filled with admiration, but as life often proves, admiration can quickly turn to ashes when pride and tradition collide with choice. Because Miriam was not just the pride of her father, she was also a young woman with her own heart. It was during a community festival that her life changed. Drums beat in the square, women danced in colorful wrappers, and men lifted calabashes of palm wine. There, Miriam saw Chike Nosu, a humble carpenter from a modest family. He was not rich. He did not wear the white agada and red coral beads of chief's sons. Instead, his clothes were plain, but his hands carried the strength of honest labor. His smile was gentle, and his respect for Miriam lit a flame in her heart. Days turned to weeks, and secret glances became conversations. Conversations became walks, and soon Miriam's heart was completely Chike's. He was kind, humble, and dreamt of building a future by the strength of his work, not by the wealth of his father. But when Chief Obinna discovered this budding love, his pride burst out like fire. One evening, as the family gathered around the compound, he confronted Miriam with thunder in his voice. "Miriam, I hear whispers that you walk with this carpenter. Tell me it is not true." Miriam, trembling but brave, replied, "Papa, it is true. His name is Chike. He loves me, and I love him." Grace gasped softly and covered her mouth. Silence fell on the compound like a heavy curtain. The chief's face darkened. "Love? What is love without status? Do you know who you are? You are the daughter of Chief Obinna, elder of this land. My child cannot marry a man who owns nothing but a hammer and a dream." Miriam's lips quivered. She spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "Papa, you always taught me that integrity matters more than riches. Chike is good, he respects me, and he fears God. That is all that I desire." But those words only sharpened her father's fury. Pride had blinded him. In the days that followed, pressure grew heavier. The chief called family meetings. Wealthy suitors came with gifts, yam buns, new clothes, even motorbikes. They promised Miriam a life of riches, but she refused each one. The villagers whispered, "Does she think she knows better than her father? Can love put food on the table?" Her mother begged her in quiet corners, "My child, please listen to your father. He only wants your good. Don't cause a rift in this house." But Miriam's heart remained unshaken. "Mama, would you want me to marry a man I cannot love only to please the village? I would rather struggle with Chike than live a rich lie." Grace wept at her daughter's words, knowing the clash between pride and love would break something precious in their home. And break it did. One sunny market day, under the watchful eyes of neighbors and elders, Miriam made her choice. She walked beside Chike, holding his hand in public, a bold declaration. When her father saw them walking past his stall, his fury exploded. He stormed into the center of the square, his cane striking the earth as the crowd turned to see what drama was unfolding. "Miriam," he shouted, "you dare defy me? You walk hand in hand with this disgrace. You choose shame over respect." Miriam, though trembling, lifted her chin. "Papa, I choose my heart. I choose Chike." The crowd gasped. Obina's voice roared louder than the festival drums. "Then hear me today. If you walk with him, walk away forever. You are no longer a daughter of this house. From today, my blood is cut from yours. You shall never set foot in my compound again." The words rang through the sky like thunder. Miriam dropped to her knees in tears. "Papa, please." Her mother ran forward, clutching the chief's arm, begging, "Husband, stop. She is our only child. Do not cast her out." But his father shook her hand away. His face was stone, his heart iron. He turned his back and walked into the compound, slamming the wooden gate shut. The villagers gasped. Some whispered curses. Others shook their heads sadly. Miriam wept bitterly, her tears falling on red earth. Chike held her hand tightly, whispering, "We will endure. We will not die." Villagers murmured, "The daughter of the mighty chief, now disowned. Where will such pride end?" That night, Miriam packed a small bag. Her mother secretly hid some coins of money into her hand, embracing her tightly. "My treasure, forgive me. I could not save you, but go, live, survive. May God guide you." Miriam held her mother's frail hands and whispered, "Do not cry, Mama. One day I will return, and when I return, I will not come empty-handed." With trembling steps, she left the compound. Villagers stood by their door fronts watching silently. No one spoke. No one called her name. The gates of her father's house closed behind her. And just like that, the golden daughter of the land vanished into the night. But destiny is never silenced by rejection. 3 years would pass before Miriam walked again into her father's life. When she did, she would own the very roof he once forbade her beneath. The night Miriam left her father's house was one of the longest in her life. The stars hung above the village sky, but for her, everything felt dim. She carried her small bag on one shoulder, her other hand clinging tightly to Chike's palm. The echoes of her father's words still blistered her ears. "You are no longer a daughter of this house. Never return again." The red road stretched endlessly before them as they walked past farms and palm trees. The villagers had all turned to their beds, but whispers of gossip lingered in the evening air. Even the silence seemed to remind Miriam of the weight she carried, an exile, a girl without a home. By the time dawn broke, They found themselves in a neighboring town, tired and hungry. Miriam's wrapper was covered in dust, and Chike's feet were blistered. Yet they had nowhere to go. For the first few days, they squatted in a small abandoned hut on the outskirts of town. It was roofed with rusted zinc sheets and smelled of damp soil. They spread the few belongings on the floor and tried to call it home. Food was scarce. Chike would sell his carpentry skills to anyone who would listen, knocking on doors, begging for a chance to fix broken chairs or weak doors. Often, men would laugh at him. "Ah, a chief's daughter reduced to this? And you, a poor carpenter with no shop? Go back to your village before hunger kills you." Women in the market sneered at Miriam as she offered to wash clothes for a few coins. One shouted, "Ah, see who wanted to follow love. Love does not buy food." Laughter followed her wherever she went, slicing into her dignity. Miriam's heart broke more than once, but she pressed forward. In the evenings, when hunger left her dizzy, she would whisper to Chike, "We will not die here. Even if the world mocks us, we will endure." His silence was heavy, but his hand squeezing hers gave her strength to hope. One day, Chike's distant uncle heard of their situation. This uncle was widely respected in his own community, known for running several shops. Out of pity, or perhaps pride, he invited them to stay in his compound. At first, Miriam was relieved. They finally had a roof over their heads and regular meals on the table. But soon, she saw the truth. The uncle's help was not kindness but exploitation. Chike was worked from dawn until dusk, building furniture for the uncle's business, yet he was given no pay. When Miriam protested gently, the uncle sneered, "You should be grateful. Do you want to return to the street? If you eat my food, you must work for it. Marriage to a poor girl has made you proud, Miriam. You are lucky I did not turn you both away." Miriam wiped her tears at night, not letting Chike see her cry. But she knew they had exchanged the shackles of poverty for the chains of servitude. Within months, the uncle grew tired of feeding 2 extra mouths and cast them out, telling them harshly to find their own way. They left that compound, carrying only what little they had arrived with. Humiliated once again, their next home was worse. A tiny, cracked one-room apartment near the edge of the city. The walls leaked when it rained, and mosquitoes buzzed mercilessly at night. Miriam worked as a domestic servant for a wealthy woman who owned several tailoring outfits. Each morning she cooked, scrubbed the floors, and ironed mountains of clothes. The madam often insulted her. "You smell of poverty. Work harder. If you had listened to your father, you would not be here cleaning other people's shoes." And yet, when payday came, the woman looked at her with cold eyes and said, "I owe you. Come next week." But next week never came. Miriam's chest ached at this betrayal. She had been cheated of her honest labor. When she tried to quit, the woman laughed bitterly. "Ha, you, quit. You think there are jobs waiting for you? Suitors lining up? Go and starve, foolish girl." The days dragged slowly, heavy as stones. But amid all these struggles, Miriam realized something stronger. She had not chosen wrongly in Chike. For though they were scorned, though he was mocked for not providing like a man, Chike stood by her. He refused to abandon her. He split his single loaf of bread with her when hunger weighed their bellies down. He carried her bag when her back ached. He prayed quietly by her side when despair threatened them both. Months passed. Miriam fell pregnant, and though joy sparked briefly in her heart, hunger and shame hovered like vultures. Whispers from the community grew worse. Imagine, she threw away her father's wealth only to carry the child of a poor nobody. What will they feed this baby? Dust? The words pierced her like arrows. Occasionally, Miriam doubted herself and wondered if she had truly gambled her life away. But whenever her hand fell on her swelling belly, She reminded herself, if I must suffer, I will suffer for my own choices, not for anyone else's pride. One day, a childhood friend spotted Miriam at the edge of the markets, exhausted, carrying a tray of boiled corn she was struggling to sell. The friend pulled her aside. Miriam, leave this man before you wither. Come with me. I can introduce you to men in the city who will care for you. You are still beautiful. You can have a better life. Exchange pride for comfort. Forget love. Miriam shook her head sharply, even as tears filled her eyes. Never. This path may be slow, but it is mine. I will not sell myself. When blessings come, he will share them with me. Until then, I will not betray my vows. Her friend looked at her with pity and walked away. Miriam resumed her humble trade, half the tray still unsold by dusk. Carrying her load home, she whispered to her unborn child, "Don't worry, little one. We may be poor today, but one day you will stand in a house we call ours." But just as desperation seemed to choke her life dry, a wave of hope approached, quiet and unexpected. For at the very bottom of despair, destiny often begins to write its redemption. On a hot afternoon, Miriam accepted work serving water at a large wedding. The aromas of jollof rice, fried chicken, and pepper soup stung her empty stomach as she carried jugs from table to table. She wore an old skirt, but her quiet dignity shone brighter than the silk gowns of guests. Among the guests was a woman Miriam had never met, but one who would one day change her story forever. This woman noticed the girl, who, though poorly dressed, smiled kindly even when insulted for spilling a drop of water. A woman who bowed with humility with each "thank you, ma," and cleaned quietly without complaint. This woman's name was Madame Ebele. She watched Miriam closely, and as the drums of the wedding faded, one thought filled Ebele's mind. That girl has something more than suffering. She has spirit. And that spirit was about to open a new door. Miriam did not know it yet, but her wandering years were about to take a sharp turn. What began as humiliation at a stranger's wedding would soon become the doorway to her destiny. The wedding where Miriam walked that afternoon seemed like another reminder of her struggles. The crowd danced in brightness and laughter, their jewelry glittering under the sun. The air smelt of well-seasoned meat, sweet drinks, and fried delicacies. But while others feasted, Miriam walked silently from table to table, carrying water jugs, her body tired, her heart heavy. She did not know that among the guests, one pair of careful eyes was following her every move. Madame Ebele was not just another guest. She was a woman of influence, owner of one of the most successful catering and bakery businesses in the city. People whispered her name respectfully, pointing at her table. She was dressed elegantly, but unlike many others, her eyes held no pride. They held curiosity and wisdom. And when she saw Miriam, sweaty, poorly clothed, but serving with a quiet dignity that many with fine clothes lacked, her curiosity became admiration. Later that evening, when the event ended, Miriam sat quietly at the corner of the compound. She rubbed her swollen feet and prayed under her breath that she would earn enough to buy at least garri for the night. That was where Madame Ebele approached her. "Child," she said softly, "what is your name?" Miriam looked up startled by the elegant woman addressing her. "My name is Miriam, ma." Ebele studied her closely. "You walked with strength. Even when they shouted at you, you did not retaliate. Why?" Miriam lowered her eyes, unsure if she was being mocked. "Because, ma, when one has nothing, dignity must be kept inside. It is the last clothing you cannot afford to lose." Ebele's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. Behind her eyes, admiration grew stronger. "This one is not ordinary," she thought. 3 days later, Miriam heard a knock on the fragile door of her small one-room apartment. She hurried to open it and found Madame Ebele standing outside. "May I speak with you?" the older woman asked. Surprised, Miriam welcomed her in. The room was shabby, but she arranged it quickly. Chike greeted her respectfully, confused as to why someone of her caliber would step into their humble home. After brief words, Ebele looked directly at Miriam and asked, "Would you like to work for me? Not as a house help, as an assistant in my bakery. I will pay you properly. And if you are willing to learn, I will teach you skills that will last longer than coins." At that moment, Miriam felt something stir inside her chest, a spark she had not felt since the day she left her father's house. Hope. "Yes, ma," she said, her voice trembling. "I will work. I will learn. I will not take this for granted."
And so Miriam's turning point began. Her first weeks at the bakery were difficult. She woke before dawn, traveled long hours across dusty roads, and worked until late night. She carried flour bags, cleaned trays, and washed the ovens. But unlike her past labor, here she was not insulted or cheated. Each evening, her wage was handed to her fairly. More importantly, Ebele treated her not as a servant but as a student. She corrected gently when Miriam made mistakes, taught her how to measure flour correctly, how to balance sugar with yeast, how to clean equipment with precision. At first, Miriam fumbled often. She burnt a batch of cakes and nearly cried. But Madam Ebele reassured her, "Failure is not final unless you stop trying. Burnt bread has fed no one, but mistakes feed the soul wisdom. Start again." Miriam wiped her tears and tried again. The second attempt was better. The third was near perfect. By the end of 2 months, she produced pastries so fluffy and sweet that customers began asking specifically for the girl's bread.
One late evening, after closing, Ibili sat Miriam down. "Young one," she said, "do you know why I helped you? Because I see a flame within you. It is small now, but with wind and patience, it can grow to light an entire house. You have resilience many girls lack. Guard it and build on it. My bakery is not the end. It is only your beginning." Miriam's eyes filled with tears. Since her exile, she had been mocked and ridiculed, treated as nothing. This was the first time someone with power looked at her and saw not shame, but promise. "Thank you, Ma," she whispered. "I will make you proud."
Months passed, and Miriam began to rise. She no longer merely cleaned. She baked pies, decorated cakes, and learned cost management. She began to understand how money flows, how savings matter, how one client satisfied can bring 10 others. For the first time since her father turned her out, Miriam felt a sense of control over her future. With each loaf sold, each cake delivered, she knew she was slowly rising beyond the limits set by disgrace. Chike too labored in carpentry workshops, taking small contracts wherever possible. Though their clothes remained simple, their days of starvation ended. Together, they began to dream, not just of survival, but of building something lasting. One night, Miriam whispered to her husband, "Do you see it? Step by step, God is lifting us. The world mocked us, but we will not be crushed."
Slowly, opportunities stretched wider. Madam Ibele trusted Miriam with small catering contracts for local events. She gave her authority to manage a small team, to organize goods and ensure food arrived on time. Miriam handled these responsibilities with precision and humility. Each successful job became a thread in the new tapestry of her destiny. But in her quiet moments, when she lay awake in the shabby apartment, Miriam would remember her father's gate slamming shut. His voice still echoed in her dreams. And though she smiled each day at work, a small ache lived in her heart, a longing for her mother's embrace, a quiet wish that her father could see her not as failure, but as a daughter again. But she pressed those thoughts aside. She could not look back. The only path now was forward.
And forward she went. One market Saturday,
A woman approached her stand at a small event and asked, "Who baked these meat pies? They taste like heaven." When Miriam timidly admitted they were hers, the woman exclaimed, "I want you to bake for my son's wedding." That job became her largest contract yet. Dozens of trays of pastries, hundreds of meat pies, decorated cakes. It pushed her skills to new heights. At the end of the wedding, she earned her biggest income so far. That night, as she stacked her earnings carefully, tears rolled down her cheeks. "From rejection to provision," she whispered. "From disgrace to dignity. This is my turning point." And truly, the turning had only just begun. Miriam did not yet realize that learning to bake was not just a way to earn money. It was her foundation for empire. What seemed like a small chance was shaping her into the woman who would one day return to her father's house, not as a beggar seeking pity, but as the rightful owner holding the keys.
Miriam's days with Madame Ebele turned into weeks, then months, and before long, years had passed. What began as clumsy baking and never serving grew into expertise and, more importantly, confidence. At first, Miriam was just another worker, measuring flour, decorating cupcakes, and balancing orders. But with every task, she absorbed knowledge. She studied not just the recipes, but also the rhythm of business itself. She noted how Ebele spoke to clients, how she budgeted expenses, how she reinvested profits into new ovens or delivery vans. Soon, Miriam became more than an assistant. She became Ebele's right hand. When large contracts came in, Ebele trusted her to lead teams, organize schedules, and handle customer demands with grace. Others in the shop grumbled in envy, but no one could deny Miriam's skill. Her rise was quiet but steady, like a seed growing roots deep underground.
Chike remained her steady partner. His carpentry contracts expanded too. Though still modest, he was slowly gathering recognition for his craftsmanship. Together, they became more than just a couple scraping through life. They became partners with shared dreams. On late nights, Miriam and Chike would sit on a wooden bench in front of their one-room apartment, feeling the cool city breeze pass by. "Chike," Miriam whispered once, clutching a notebook filled with scribbles of recipes and small budgets. "One day we will run our own shop." Chike smiled, wiping sweat from his brow after a long day at a workshop. "Yes, Miriam, and when we do, it will not just feed us, it will feed our future." With that shared vision, the two carried on, step by step, little by little.
The true turning of their fortunes began with a wedding. A respected city man ordered a grand cake from Madame Ebele's bakery. When the day of the event arrived, disaster struck. The lead baker fell ill. Without hesitation, Madame Ebele called on Miriam. "Miriam," she said, her tone sharp yet trusting, "it is your test. Do not fail." Sweat lined Miriam's temples as she decorated the towering 5-tier cake. Hours stretched into midnight, her fingers skillfully molding fondant flowers, her heart pounding with fear. When the final piece was placed, the cake stood as a masterpiece. At the wedding, guests gasped in awe. Many asked, "Who made this?" And for the first time, Madame Ebele pointed not to herself, but to Miriam. "Give her the praise. She has earned it." Those words changed Miriam's life. Clients began to call directly for that young woman's cakes. Orders increased, her reputation grew, and though she still worked under Madame Ebele, she slowly began saving every extra coin. After 3 years, Miriam and Chike gathered enough to rent a small kiosk. It was no palace, just a wooden stall beside a busy road, painted white with blue letters, Adora's Bakes, named after their first daughter. The beginning was humble. Miriam baked from midnight in Ebele's kitchen, carried trays to her store before dawn, and sold them until dusk. At first, sales were slow.
Pedestrians passed by uninterested, but soon one child tasted her sugar bread and told his mother. The mother returned, then her friends came too. News spread that Miriam's snacks were not just food, they were joy wrapped in dough. By the end of the first year, the little store fed hundreds daily. Her made pies, soft chin-chin, and butter bread became famous. Miriam hired 2 assistants and reinvested in better equipment. Chike built shelves and crafted new tables for the store with his own hands. Their little corner of survival had become a flourishing family business.
But Miriam did not stop there. She had learned from Ebele, reinvest, expand, dream bigger. Soon, she rented a bigger shop with neat glass shelves and hired uniform staff. Cakes for birthdays, weddings, and naming ceremonies poured in weekly. And with every new client, her confidence soared. She was no longer the girl mocked for carrying trays of corn. She was a businesswoman commanding respect. It was not long before journalists noticed. A local magazine ran a feature. From poverty to pastries, the remarkable rise of Adora's bakes. Her story began spreading across the city. Young women visited her to ask, "How did you do it? Teach us, encourage us." Miriam spoke openly. "I started with nothing but dignity, patience, and work. If I could rise, so can you." Her business grew strong enough to buy its own land for a permanent bakery building. And when profits increased, she and Chike made their first bold investment into property rentals. They purchased a small 2-flat house in the city. What once would have seemed impossible now became real.
Yet through her success, Miriam remained humble. She still prayed at night, still remembered the sting of betrayal, still whispered thanks for every client. But deep inside, the memory of her father cutting her off never faded. Even holding land papers felt surreal. She would sometimes stare at the documents, thinking, a daughter once denied a home, now owns one by her own hands. She smiled, but her chest still carried a silent ache for reconciliation. That wound, however, was not ready to heal, not yet. While Miriam and Chike built prosperity in the city, news filtered from the village. Whispers reached her ears that Chief Obina's wealth was not as untouched as it seemed. Some said a business partner cheated him in a land scheme. Some claimed he borrowed from banks and failed to repay. But Miriam dismissed rumors, focusing on her work. She did not gloat, nor did she seek revenge. Still, fate was quietly preparing a stage where both paths, her meteoric rise and her father's crumbling pride, would collide in fiery irony. By their 8th year of marriage, Miriam's life had transformed completely. She was no longer the scared girl weeping under a leaky roof. She was a respected entrepreneur, employer of many, owner of property, role model to young women, and partner to a husband who once shared stale bread slices under the moonlight. "Do you see it, Chiki?" she said one evening, standing before their newly opened bakery branch. He wrapped his arms around her gently. "I see more than I dreamed, Miriam. I see proof that patience does not fail, that love is enough when joined with hard work." She leaned against him, satisfied, yet somewhere deep inside her heart she admitted one last longing. A longing not for wealth, nor for applause from the city, but for the day she could walk boldly back into her father's house, not with shame, but with triumph. And soon enough, that day was coming. For in the same season, Miriam was buying new land. Her father was preparing to kneel before bankers in shame. His compound that once rang with respect would echo with whispers of disgrace. The daughter, Disowned, was rising in the city. The father, once untouchable, was falling in the village. The two worlds were on a collision course, and the stage was set for destiny's cruel but poetic twist. Back in the village of Uzoma, the once proud home of Chief Obina Okafor was no longer the same. Where laughter once filled the compound, silence now lingered like smoke after fire. Flowers along the veranda withered, walls cracked from neglect. The once lively courtyard, where villagers gathered to greet him with respect, now echoed only with distant whispers carried by the wind. The mighty chief, the man who once declared his dignity above all, was slowly falling. It began with greed and then pride. Chief Obinna had invested heavily in business ventures with his longtime friend and ally, a man named Chief Nnamdi. Nnamdi was a smooth talker, freshly returned from abroad. He had a loud laugh, dressed in fine imported fabrics, and promised wealth beyond imagination. "Obinna, my brother, listen," Nnamdi said one afternoon, slapping his palm in excitement. "This is a cash crop investment. Big money, fast return. Cocoa, palm oil, gold, import-export. We will retire kings." Blinded by the dream of becoming richer, Obinna sold not just farmland, but also borrowed heavily against his properties. He liquidated his savings, ignoring the cautious voice of his wife Grace. "Husband," she pleaded late one night, as candlelight flickered across their small bedroom, "be careful. The world is filled with smooth talkers. Why not invest little by little?" But Obinna scoffed. "I am Chief Obinna. I did not rise to this point by being afraid. You women worry too much. When money multiplies, you will smile." Grace sighed and prayed silently. At first, the village noticed signs of wealth. Nnamdi paraded papers, waving them at meetings, promising contracts overseas. Obinna boasted before elders that soon he would surpass even the richest men in the region. But cracks soon formed. Shipments never arrived. Documents turned false. The promised returns vanished before anyone touched them. One hot afternoon, villagers gathered for a truth they long suspected. Chief Nnamdi was gone, vanished, escaped with the money. By that time, Obinna's debts were staggering. Bankers arrived with notices. The cocoa farms were seized. 2 of his lands near the stream were auctioned quickly. Rumors spread like wildfire. The proud chief who once walked with a staff now hid indoors, avoiding public shame.
The whispers grew cruel. Even yam sellers are richer than the great Obinna now. What kind of elder loses his land so carelessly? His pride is the cause. He chased his only daughter away, and now see what curse has followed him. Children giggled behind fences when he passed. Neighbors smirked openly, no longer bowing as he walked by. His red chief's cap, once respected, gathered dust on a shelf. Laughter, once thunder in his courtyard, turned into silence and disgrace. Debt collectors returned again and again. Livestock taken, furniture dragged out, food stripped. Worst of all, word came that even his family compound, the ancestral pride of his lineage, might be taken to cover the debts. The very home from which he cast Miriam out in pride now stood one step away from the hands of strangers. Grace, his loyal wife, remained by his side. Her back bent lower than before, but her spirit was steady. She cooked with smaller portions, sold small wares in the village market to bring coins home. Yet her eyes often carried sorrow, longing for the daughter she had not seen for years. Every month she marked a hidden calendar with little red ink strokes. 1 year, 2 years, and then 3. Waiting, hoping, believing that somehow Miriam was safe. Meanwhile, Chief Obinna's pride crumbled further. At village council meetings, elders no longer gave him a chair of honor. Some avoided him altogether. He no longer spoke loudly, for no one cared to listen. His shame became entertainment for gossipers. One day, when a banker publicly served him papers for an upcoming auction of his compound, the humiliation was unbearable. Men he once commanded respect from laughed quietly behind palm wine calabashes. Young men shook their heads. Even his enemies pitied him. Grace begged him gently, "My husband, perhaps we should send for Miriam. Maybe she will forgive us. She is still our daughter. She can help." But Obinna roared in anger, "Never! That girl disrespected me. She spat on my name by marrying that carpenter. I would rather starve than beg her." Grace fell silent, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her heart ached. The man she married was no longer strong, only brittle. But she said no more, for words could not heal arrogance.
Soon enough, auction day was fixed. Bright posters littered the market. Property of Chief Obinna Okafor to be auctioned for settlement of debt. Word spread not only in Uzoma, but to nearby towns. Onlookers planned eagerly to attend, not just to bid for land or goods, but to witness the dramatic fall of a man who once showered the land with stubborn pride. On the morning of the auction, neighbors gathered outside his compound, whispering. Women said, "The mighty tree has fallen." Men clicked their tongues in pity, yet also in secret satisfaction. Obinna's shoulders sagged as he sat inside, refusing to come out. His once tall frame bent under invisible weight. Grace tried to place a hand on his shoulder, but he brushed it away bitterly. Inside, he choked bitter words. "My own lands gone. My own hands betrayed." But outside, the crowd thickened. Cars rolled into the dusty compound. Bankers in neat suits stepping out with files. One of them raised his voice, calling the gathering to order. The auction was about to begin. The villagers waited eagerly, whispering as the wealthy began to bid. The courtyard buzzed, not with respect, but with greed and expectation. But none of them knew that the winning hand would not just claim Obinna's compound. It would rewrite every shameful word spoken against Miriam. For the daughter once disowned was coming back, not as a beggar, not in disgrace, but this time as the quiet conqueror.
The day of the auction began with scorching sun. The earth was dry and dust swirled through Uzoma as neighbors poured into Chief Obinna's compound. Men leaned on their walking sticks. Women carried baskets but paused to gossip, and children ran between legs, chasing shadows. Even those with no intention of placing a bid came to watch. This was not merely an auction. It was the unraveling of a once mighty man's pride. Bankers arrived in pressed suits, clipboards in hand. They called the crowd to order. At the center, Obinna sat slumped in a wooden chair, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. He refused to make eye contact with anyone. Grace sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee, her face lined with quiet grief. Murmurs echoed across the compound. "The chief is finished. They will take everything. Who will buy his house?" Maybe one of the big men from Enugu. The auctioneer raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to begin proceedings for the sale of Chief Obinna's compound. Shall we begin?" The first bids came quickly. Wealthy merchants and landlords nodded with calm greed. The numbers climbed higher. 50,000, 70,000, 100,000. Each figure pushed Obinna deeper into his chair. Grace wept softly. The home where she raised her daughter, where years of family laughter once rang, was being sold like a sack of yam. The auctioneer yelled again. "Do I hear 150,000? Yes, 150? Another man raised his hand. 170. A hush fell over the crowd as amounts leapt higher.
Obinna closed his eyes, feeling each number like a wound across his pride. Finally, the auctioneer shouted, 200,000! Do I have 200,000? A voice rang clear from the back. 250,000. Heads turned immediately. A woman stood at the edge of the gathering, clad in a flowing gown of fine fabric, her hair tied neatly, her presence commanding attention. Beside her stood a man, tall, weathered, with strong carpenter's hands, and clutching her hand was a little girl with sparkling eyes. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Who is that? I've never seen her here before. The auctioneer scribbled quickly. 250. Do I hear 300? Another merchant bid, but the mysterious woman did not flinch. She raised her hand again. 350,000. The crowd gasped. Obinna's eyes opened, his face pale. Something about her voice clawed into his memory. The auction grew tense. Merchants hesitated. One by one, competitors dropped out, incapable of chasing her determination. At last, the auctioneer slammed his file. Sold to the lady at 350,000. Cheers and claps filled the compound. Some laughed. The chief's house is gone. Finished. Obinna buried his face in his palm, humiliated. Then, the woman stepped forward, walking slowly, her footsteps deliberate. When she reached the auctioneer, she signed the papers with elegance, then turned to face the crowd. Her voice carried across the courtyard. I thank you, but perhaps before you celebrate too quickly, the village should know one thing. Her eyes swept the room, and then, steady and unyielding, she fixed her gaze on Chief Obinna. Papa, she said softly. The word sliced through the compound like lightning. A silence consumed the air. People gasped, jaws dropping. Papa? Did she say Papa? Chief Obinna's body stiffened. His head shot upward. His mouth opened, but no sound escaped. His eyes bulged, filled with disbelief. Papa, Miriam repeated, her voice firmer now. It is me, your daughter, Miriam. Grace cried out instantly, rushing from her chair. She threw her arms around Miriam tightly, weeping uncontrollably, whispering, My child, Miriam, my treasure, I knew you would survive. I knew it. The crowd erupted in shock. Some clutched their heads, others muttered, The disowned child, she returned after all these years. Children pointed at Miriam's daughter. That must be the chief's granddaughter. All eyes turned back to Obinna. His chest heaved. His skin fell from his hand. Slowly, he struggled to his feet, staring at Miriam as though she were a ghost. Miriam, he stammered. His lips trembled. His eyes flooded unexpectedly with tears. But how? I drove you away. His words broke, and for the first time in his life, Chief Obinna sank to his knees before the crowd.
The chief, who once stood tall, roaring in pride, knelt trembling in weakness before the very daughter he had once banished. Forgive me, he whispered hoarsely. Forgive me, child. I failed you. I cursed you when I should have protected you. I drove you away because of my pride. Look at me now. Ruined. Empty. I am no father. The crowd gasped louder than before. Elders shifted uncomfortably, never imagining they would see such a sight. A chief on his knees before his own daughter. Grace fell to her knees beside him, pleading with her eyes. Miriam, my blood, forgive your father. His pride destroyed him, but he is still your father. Miriam's eyes filled with tears. Memories flooded back. The day he slammed the gate, the loneliness of nights in the city, the hunger, the cruel whispers. For a moment, pain burned hotter than fire. But then, she remembered her struggles,
her triumphs, the lessons of resilience, and in her heart, she knew bitterness could never rebuild what was broken. Only forgiveness could. She bent low, helping her father up with trembling hands. "Papa," she whispered, her voice thick with tears, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because carrying hatred would make me like you once were. I forgive you, for Mama, for my child, for our family." The crowd murmured in awe. Many wept openly. Some muttered, "This is greater than wealth. This is strength." Miriam reached into her handbag and pulled out 2 sets of documents. She pressed them into her father's weakened hands. "These are yours," she said. "One deed of land in your name, another deed in Mama's. I have cleared your debts. The house you thought you lost, I own it now. But you will still live here, not as a master, but in peace. You once cast me out of this place, but today I bring it back to you." Her father stared at the papers, his body trembling, tears rolling uncontrollably down his face. His proud shoulders shook like a beaten child. Then a tiny voice broke the silence. Her daughter, Adora, tugged his wrapper and asked, innocently, "Grandpa, why are you crying?" The crowd erupted in cries. Obinna laughed through his tears, lifting little Adora into his arms. He kissed her forehead tenderly, shaking his head in disbelief. "My blood, my forgiveness, my second chance." The villagers burst into song. Drums beat, voices rose, clapping echoed through the square. But the celebration was not for a chief. It was for the daughter who had returned, not with vengeance, but with dignity. From far corners of Uzoma, people poured in, marveling. The rejected one became the redeemer. The daughter they cast away returned with everything. As torches lit the night, the compound once heavy with shame rang again with laughter, not of pride, but of reconciliation. That night, Obinna sat on the veranda he once had abandoned, looking toward the stars. Grace sat beside him, her arm around Miriam, and little Adora asleep in her lap. "I thought pride was my crown," Obinna whispered bitterly, "but pride destroyed me." Miriam placed her hand over his. "Papa, crowns fade, but love builds kingdoms the world cannot take away. If only you had chosen love before." Obinna bent his head. "Then let me spend my last days proving it now." And so the story turned. The child who once wept at her father's rejection became the reason he lifted his head again. The father who slammed his gate in anger now kept it open in humility. The rejected daughter became the savior of her household, not by vengeance, not by spite, but by the irresistible power of resilience, forgiveness, and love.
The sun rose gently over Uzoma the morning after Miriam's return. The compound that once echoed only with whispers of shame now brimmed with life again. Villagers moved in and out, children played near the veranda, and laughter resurfaced where for years it had been missing. For the first time in years, Chief Obinna woke not to the sound of debt collectors or neighbors mocking him, but to the soft giggles of his granddaughter Adora chasing chickens across the courtyard. Sitting on a wooden stool, Obinna watched her, his eyes brimming with tears he no longer hid. Grace sat beside him, humming old lullabies while Miriam prepared food in the kitchen. Life had not merely returned, it had been reborn. Miriam did not waste time mourning the years she had lost. Instead, she poured her heart into building a legacy for tomorrow. Within weeks, she opened a branch of Adora's Bakes right in Uzoma's village square. The aroma of freshly baked meat pies, coconut buns, and soft bread drifted across the streets every morning. Villagers who once mocked her lined up with coins in their hands, eager for a taste. Children chewed happily. Elders sat in corners sipping tea with her pastries, and every bite carried not just flavor, but dignity. It was more than a bakery. It was a symbol, a testimony that resilience could transform rejection into triumph. Grace walked at the counter sometimes, smiling proudly as she served customers.
Chief Obina, though humbled, often greeted villagers politely when they came. No longer did he walk tall with arrogance. Instead, he bowed his head slightly in humility. "Forgive me," he would say to those he once looked down upon. "Age has taught me that pride feeds no soul. Respect is sweeter than riches." Some villagers struggled to believe this was the same man whose voice once shook the council. But people change. Pain had broken him, but love rebuilt him. And Miriam, instead of gloating, embraced her father's newfound humility. For she knew revenge was easy, but forgiveness was eternal. Her business flourished beyond the village. With the credibility she had gained, she expanded operations in nearby towns and even the city. Adora's Bakes became a franchise, its name recognized and admired. But Miriam did not keep her success only to herself. She remembered her nights of hunger, her wounds of ridicule, the betrayals she had faced, and she made a vow. "No girl would walk the same lonely road I did, if I can help it." She founded the Adora Foundation, a center for single mothers and abused young women. They taught skills like baking, tailoring, and beadwork. They offered shelter, counseling, and small loans to start businesses. Word spread quickly. Women who had lost hope found safe refuge. Young girls who once would have been cast away found sisters and mentors. Mothers who thought their lives were over picked up tools, worked with their hands, and smiled again. The Adora Foundation became more than a program. It became a movement.
Soon, journalists from cities came to cover Miriam's story. Articles bore headlines like, "From Disowned to Distinguished, the woman who built empires from ashes." "Chief's lost daughter returns to rebuild not just a home, but a nation's daughters." Miriam appeared on radio broadcasts. She did not brag of riches. She spoke instead of lessons. "To be rejected is painful," she told interviewers. "But do not believe rejection is the end. Sometimes it is the fire that makes your metal stronger. My father's pride pushed me out, but survival pushed me forward, and forgiveness brought me home." Her words echoed far beyond Uzoma. Calls poured in from across the country. Daughters reconciled with estranged fathers. Abandoned mothers found courage. Betrayed wives lifted their heads once again. What began as Miriam's private suffering became a public testimony for healing. At home, Obina watched all of this with humbled gratitude. One evening, as he stood in Miriam's bustling bakery branch in the village, he said quietly, "Child, it was you who gave me back my name. Not wealth, not status, but you. The very one I threw away saved me. May my gray hairs bend low for you forever." Miriam touched his shoulder and answered softly, "Papa, the people we cast away often become the ones chosen by destiny to lift us again. I held no bitterness, for bitterness builds no home, but forgiveness heals generations." She did not say those words only for him. She said them for every villager listening, for the young girls at the doorway, for the fathers who had once thought honor was worth more than love. As the years passed, Miriam's bakery chain became a household name. Cakes for grand weddings, sweet pies for coronations, buns for local schools, all carried the stamp of Adora's Bakes. Adora herself grew under her mother's care, attending good schools, her future bright. She often visited her grandfather's house, running with village children, climbing fruit trees, and laughing in open fields. She was proof that love, when planted, grows into legacies taller than mansions. Grace, though older, walked lighter now. She no longer bent under the weight of sorrow. Each evening she rocked gently on the veranda, smiling as laughter filled her home again. One day, after a church Thanksgiving service, the entire family gathered in front of the bakery. Villagers surrounded them, clapping and singing. Miriam stood beside her parents, her husband Chike, and her daughter Adora. An elder approached and said, "Miriam, you are more than daughter. You are queen even without crown.
Your story has lit the whole land. For generations, children will hear how the rejected child returned, not with vengeance, but with glory. The villagers erupted in cheers. In response, Miriam raised her hand to quiet them and spoke softly, yet firmly. I am no queen. I am just a woman who refused to let pain define her. My lesson is simple. Pride destroys. Forgiveness restores. Choices we make in hurt can ruin a family, but choices we make in love can heal a nation. Let no father disown his child for pride. Let no child carry hatred forever, for in the end, only compassion wins. The silence that followed her words was deep, deeper than any sermon preached that morning.
That night, as stars blanketed the village sky, Miriam sat alone by the window of her childhood room, her room now restored. She gazed out into the night and whispered a prayer of thanks. Her life had traveled full circle, from beloved jewel to rejected outcast, from the forgotten corners of poverty to the heights of prosperity, from bitterness to forgiveness, from rejection to a legacy of empowerment. She smiled, gripping the window frame. Pain did not define me. What I chose after pain did. And that is the truth of Miriam's journey. The girl disowned before marriage returned with her head held high, not only to own her father's house, but to rebuild her family, her community, and more importantly, herself. Her life teaches us all something vital. Never judge a destiny by the chapter you step into. People make mistakes, people fall, people are betrayed, but every fall is a test, and every wound can become the doorway to healing. Silence protects the proud, but truth, though painful, frees the broken. Miriam's silence once came from fear. Her words later brought liberty, first to herself, then to her family, and then to women across the nation. The people thrown away, those ridiculed, mocked, and despised, are often the very ones destiny lifts to restore those who once despised them. And the sweetest victory is not revenge, it is forgiveness. So, as you leave Miriam's story today, carry this with you. Every rejection is not an ending. Sometimes it is destiny's way of pointing you toward a greater chapter, one where you rise, rebuild, and return, not with vengeance, but with triumph. Now, I ask you, what did Miriam's story teach you? Did it stir something inside you about pride, forgiveness, or family? I would love to read your reflections in the comments. If this story moved you, share it with a friend who might need hope today. And don't forget to subscribe, because more stories, true, powerful, unforgettable, are on the way. Until next time, remember, pain does not define us. What we choose after pain does.